I want to welcome you to the Retro Rogues Live. Please pay attention to our warning graphic. It states that the Retro Rogues Live show is intended for an adult audience and not intended for children under the age of 13. Parental discretion is advised. Again, I want to welcome you to the show. This is episode 150. Episode 150 of the Retro Rogues Live. This is also a collector's corner. We're going to be primarily talking about sketch cards on the front end of the show. There's a very kind of specific reason for that. And we're going to get into that. That's going to be our main topic at the top of the show. We're also going to be talking about the Injustice trailer and also talking about actually the Matrix Resurrection trailer as well. But enough about that. My name is Dave Beatty. I'm one of your hosts. For nearly the last 30 years, I've been a professional illustrator and graphic designer. Worked on a lot of fun things that some people have heard of, such as Batman Incorporated, Justice League of America, and even Superboy and the Legion of Superheroes. But enough about that. I want to welcome back my great co-host. This is Mr. Eric Alexander. Eric, please tell the folks, hopefully watching or listening at home, some of the fun things you have worked on as a creative professional.
Yes, hello everyone. I'm Eric Alexander, also known as Bass God 14. That's Bass God 14, not Bass God. That's Bass God, like a bass guitar. And I am the Chief Financial Officer of Bad Bob Productions, which is a film production company located in Arizona. Currently, I'm the executive producer in a film called Staycation, which has been filming on location in California and filming virtually via Zoom, basically all over the world.
Very cool. Very cool. I was actually trying to share our show link again on Facebook, but I ran out of time. I wasn't fast enough. All right. So to start off tonight's show, we're going to be talking about sketch cards. I have been kind of walking down memory lane with sketch cards. There's a lot of reasons for this. One of the reasons is actually because of all of the Fanatics things that's been going on. I have been wondering in my head, as a dread curiosity more than anything else, wondering about what the Fanatics thing is going to mean for the trading card industry in general. How is that going to impact, things like the non-sports trading cards, which we've talked about previously on this show. And I've wondered, is it going to affect people's ability, independent artists, cartoonists, such on and so forth, to actually get that sketch card work? Because for a lot of people, that's sometimes some of their first forays into the industry. Going back to, even the 70s and into the 80s and even the early 90s. If you wanted to break into the comic industry, one of the best things they told you to do is learn how to letter, because people always needed letterers. Back before computer lettering, someone had to do that by hand. The easiest way to get your foot in the door into the industry was to actually learn how to do lettering. Had you ever heard that before, Eric?
I think I had, actually. I think I have heard that before. It's also one of those things that's interesting. I know before the advent of digital and digital basically taking over, that was one thing a lot of people had difficulty with, was finding a decent letterer. I heard a lot of stories at San Diego Comic-Con from independent publishers and artists, things like that, and they would often talk about the fact that it was very difficult to get a good letterer.
Yeah, it was difficult. It wasn't easy. It's weird because, well, not weird, it's unusual, but one of the best letterers that I ever worked with, excuse me. Sorry, I'm trying to type at the same time because I'm trying to reshare this link. All right, we are live. Okay, that's kind of cruddy, but that's going to work. All right, so yeah, I'm not good at multitasking, but anyhow, one of the best letters I ever worked with actually was deaf. True story. And the guy was absolutely incredible. And he was actually a former missionary too. And the guy was just amazing. And when I had to talk to him actually on the phone, the way that we used to communicate was through, they have the person who kind of transcribes. I guess they type it out or whatever, and they read the response back to you. I don't know if you've ever had that experience, but it was very unusual.
I've never spoken to a deaf person on the phone. That's an interesting experience.
Yeah, it was weird. It was a weird thing. But he was just incredible, absolutely incredible. He was actually a really good inker, and always had a lot of good suggestions. First comic series I ever worked on was actually a Christian comic book based series called The Legion of Light. We completed 4 issues, and absolutely none of them saw the light of day to get printed, but we completed them. There's a giant fiasco with this guy who was promising the world, and and delivered nothing but broken dreams, which is, I guess, a metaphor for the comic industry at times.
So he did not deliver redemption, apparently.
No redemption. No, none of that. But the letterer guy was absolutely amazing. I've always been impressed with the work that he's done. I actually kept one of the pages I worked on for that just because his lettering was so good. And it was weird too, because I always wondered, how do you know what these sound effects are? Duh, it's because he grew up reading comic books. That's how I knew. So there you go. Excellent. But I always wondered, but do you know what that means? Like in terms of an experience. It's weird because when I've written comic books, one of the things I've sometimes struggled with is, well, what is shick whack wow? How do you spell that? You know? Well, anyhow, so I've been going down memory lane, thinking about the Fanatics deal and thinking about how it's going to impact the trading card industry. And again, in my mind, within the last 10 years or so, one of the best ways to get your foot in the door into the industry was actually doing sketch cards. But I'm beginning to wonder now, is that going away, right? So in the process of this, I've been thinking about what are my favorite sketch cards that I've actually worked on. So I actually have 10. I have my top 10 sketch cards. These are the sketch cards when I think about that was good, or I like how that turned out, or I think about great technique or execution. These are my 10 favorite sketch cards I have actually worked on. So we're going to walk through these, and I'm going to talk a little bit about how these gigs actually came about. And then Eric, if you don't mind, I would love to hear your thoughts on them. So
yeah, that'd be great.
All right, so we're going to start with card number 10. Card number 10. This is actually the first sketch card set I ever worked on. The very, very first one. I have always liked how this card turned out. This is from Golden Age of Comics. This was for Bragent Marketing. This is like 2010, I think, 2010. And this is actually a character called Captain Flag. And this character actually debuted in 1941. Obviously, you can tell why it's called Captain Flag. He's wearing a flag, right? I always liked how this card turned out. I always thought it was kind of neat. Some of these public domain Golden Age superhero characters are really kind of cool, but to a modern audience, they probably seem like weirdly dated. But they're so imaginative, and there's so much variety in terms of the costumes and just sort of the minutia of the characters. But I always thought this card turned out really, really good. And this is one of the first cards I actually did for this set. This is one of the first sketch cards I ever drew professionally. But yeah, I've always thought it turned out really good. So this is my number 10 in my top 10 of all the sketch cards I've ever worked on. And I've done thousands and thousands of these things. What do you think about this one, Eric?
I like it. You know, I'm not familiar with the character. I can't say that I'm familiar with Captain Flag. But his design definitely, and you know, considering that he debuted in 1941, you know, you can tell that he influenced a lot of other characters through the years, and in particular, he also kind of reminds me a lot of like the Hanna-Barbera, not necessarily the Super Friends in particular, but like Hanna-Barbera had all these other weird, crazy kind of superheroes, and I feel like a lot of them, if they did not drive inspiration from this character in particular, it was one of his cousins. You know what I mean? Somebody that was under a similar banner or a ripoff or something like that. You know, depending on who came first, because I can see that like that Hanna-Barbera kind of like superhero in that image for sure. And I also like the particular style that you made the image, because it also kind of feels a little bit like that kind of like that Hanna-Barbera kind of even animated kind of version, although this is a little bit more detailed, I think, than they were. They were pretty basic with Hanna-Barbera, but still it evokes that in me when I look at it.
Yeah, the thought process in these cards in particular, I was definitely trying to capture sort of that classic cartooning kind of style. And I wanted it to be very evocative of that. I was actually looking a lot at the work actually of a classic Golden Age artist that most people actually know for Captain Marvel Jr., Mac Rayboy. Mac Rayboy also did a great run actually on Flash Gordon. And that's what I was looking at when I was working on these series. I was trying to capture the essence of Mac Rayboy. And And this card I felt like was particularly successful. Some of the other ones, not so much, but I felt like this one was pretty good.
Yeah,
We do
I
have
definitely
some.
like it. I definitely think that it's a cool image. I did want to
Thanks.
acknowledge at the Rogues Gallery that Jane's in the house. So Jane, we want to say hi to you. Thank you for tuning in. We appreciate it. And my partner, Robert McVeigh, my partner with Bad Bob Productions, he's checking us out. So Robert, we appreciate that. And both of you and anybody else, if you have some comments about the sketch cards that Dave is putting up, please feel free to let us know what your thoughts are as well.
Yeah, you can tell me if they suck. It's all good. All right, so this is card number 10. And this card did sell at auction at some point on eBay, like a long, long time ago. I have no idea what happened to it, but it's the one card from this set. If I could still own it, I would. And this is also it's one of those things that's weird about when you do art for a living on a project like this, because sometimes you get to keep the original artwork and sometimes you have to turn the art in. And a lot of people, I don't think they understand that the art is drawn directly onto the cards,
Right.
and these are standard trading card size, so you do not have a lot of real estate to work with, so it is kind of tricky to pull these cards off. All right, so let's go ahead and go on to card number 9. So this is from this was I think this is Rittenhouse. This is Dangerous Divas. This is a Marvel set, and this is Captain Marvel as I knew her. Although some people may think that she's Photon or whatever other moniker that she's been given lately, but I always think of her actually as Captain Marvel because she was Captain Marvel, the Marvel Comics version when I was growing up. I always thought this card turned out really great, and I always really liked it. I felt like it had a really kind of a fun classic style. The ink work and the rendering turned out really great on it. There's really good contrast. Doing like a white costume is kind of tricky. I remember with this one, you don't just want to just render it in gray because it just looks kind of dead and lifeless. So you want to put a little bit of color into it. So I put like some light cerulean blue, actually with a little bit of gray, and I felt like that it kind of pulled it together so that it felt like a shadow, but at the same point it kind of popped. And I always loved how this card turned out. It's one of my favorites for the Dangerous Divas, and I feel like actually the Dangerous Divas cards as a set is probably hands down the best entire trading card set that I did sketch cards for altogether. Like all the Dangerous Divas stuff I thought turned out really good. So what do you think, Eric?
Yeah, well, like Rob said, cool stuff. Rob said cool stuff. Yeah, I think it's interesting. I like it. It's one of those characters that I didn't really grow up on. We touched on that a little bit when we were doing our review of WandaVision. Dave, grew up on this character and was really familiar with her. I wasn't. If it wasn't on a cartoon or something like that, or in a movie, more likely than not, I didn't know who they were. So I don't have that kind of emotional attachment to the character. But it is interesting in today's perspective with WandaVision and where the character might be going in the future. It is kind of neat that you did do a sketch of this, Dave. It's kind of cool.
And it was kind of neat too because it was so far before WandaVision as well. That's what I thought was really interesting, is that and sometimes with these sets you're given a list of what characters you can draw, what characters you cannot draw, and they'll provide reference, and there certain times there are certain likenesses and styles and versions of costumes, and it's a free for all and do whatever you want. And then other times it's very locked down and they say, don't draw this, don't draw that, don't draw this costume, or only draw this particular costume. What was interesting about this particular character with this set is she was on the list and they didn't care what costume you put her in. So I got to put her in her classic costume. So at least what I think of as her classic costume.
Can you get into that a little bit more, Dave? Because obviously we are talking about these picks of these different sketch cards that you've done, and I think some people might not quite understand. I'll admit, even I don't really quite understand how the whole process works. So when you say, they decided which characters you can use, who's ultimately deciding that? How is that determined? Is it something that they're making a specific deal with Marvel, or is Marvel somehow otherwise involved? How does that process even work?
So the way the process typically works is Rittenhouse, in this case, was the company that actually published the cards, the Dangerous Diva cards, and just like, I guess the best way to describe it is a sketch card. It is what was once a sticker or a piece of gum or a puzzle piece. It's the special bonus thing that you might get in a pack of cards that's kind of neat for modern day collectors. And they are traditionally hand drawn directly on the card. Rittenhouse is the publisher who actually produced the set. But Marvel Comics, as the licensee, they still obviously own the rights to the characters. And so the way the process works is you are given guidance by Rittenhouse via the Marvel art directors, and it will tell you specifically, outline, what you cannot do, what you can and cannot show, what characters are approved for the set. Certain sets characters are not approved for, and then other sets other characters are approved for. Like, for example, for the longest time, you could not draw Howard the Duck. Was it Howard? Is it Howard the Duck? Is that right? Yeah, I think that's right. You couldn't draw that character on anything because of lawsuits and whatever else. And then even when the character was finally released, it got weird because it was sort of like, are you supposed to put pants on him? Like, it sounds kind of stupid, but there's a lot of stuff that's kind of obvious. It's in the guidelines, like no sexual suggestive stuff, obviously no nudity. Like, there's a lot of stuff that's obvious. And then there's a lot of other things that people don't think of. Like, for example, Rom the Space Night, while Marvel Comics published Rom the Space Night, Rom the Space Night is always on the do not draw list. And the reason being is because Marvel Comics does not own the rights to Rom the Space Night. But even though a lot of people think of him as a classic Marvel Comics character, Shogun Warriors, a lot of people think of Shogun Warriors as a classic Marvel Comics characters. You cannot draw the Shogun Warriors in the background. So there's a lot of things that Marvel's done over the years that people think of as Marvel characters that are actually not. And you cannot actually draw them and actually put them into these sets. So they're usually on the list of non-approved, like, do not draw these characters. For example, it was so weird, but when I worked on the Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 set, one of the characters that was on there that we were not, no, I take that back. It was the first Guardians of the Galaxy 1. It was one of the Cosmic Marvel sets I worked on. I forget which one. I've worked on so many of these sets. And it was so funny because one of the characters specifically outlawed over and over and over again was Ego the Living Planet. You were not supposed to draw Ego the Living Planet, yet Ego the Living Planet was actually in a movie, but they didn't want you to draw him for some reason. It was so weird. So yeah, these guidelines come from the publisher, the company that's doing the set, and then also Marvel. And then when you turn in your cards, you do however many cards you agreed to do. 150, 200 cards in the early days. It was a lot of cards. It was anywhere from 150 to 200 cards. Then it kind of started cutting back over the years to where the last couple of sets I worked on, I did between 25 and 50. And then sometimes with certain companies, if you agree to do a certain amount of sketch cards, it helped you kind of get preferential treatment in order to possibly submit to do base card art. Base card art is what everyone wants to do. Everyone wants to do the actual physical trading card. Among my circle of friends, I'm one of the few people who started out doing sketch cards who actually got to do base card art. Getting to do base card art is really difficult. It is you just don't get those opportunities, primarily because the cost of production on the set gets so high when you actually pay for original art on a trading card set. That's what sometimes makes trading card sets more valuable to collectors than others, because they're original art for this series in addition to them being these particular characters. So if you're willing to do X amount of sketch cards, it kind of increases your chance to pitch, to possibly submit, to actually get to do the base card art. So getting to do that is very, very difficult. And I've actually gotten to do that on quite a few occasions now. Although I haven't done anything really for trading cards or sketch card sets for the last several years, but I do have a recent one actually in this top 10. So let's God, I forget. Are we on 9? Let's go ahead and go to 8.
Number 8.
All right, so this is card number 8. This is for Cryptozoics. This is the Women of Legend. I always really liked how this card turned out. Obviously, this is Carrie Kelly from Dark Knight Returns. This is obviously the girl Robin. You know, it was so weird because when the Women of Legend set came up, I was really excited to work on it. And I actually did base card art actually for this set, for example. Like I did base card art and actually did sketch cards for this particular set. And I was so surprised to see this character available to draw. For the same reason I said before. It's so weird. Like you could be working on a Guardians of the Galaxy set, and even though Howard the Duck's in it, you know, you may not be allowed to draw him, right? You can't draw Ego the Living Planet. Why? Why not? You know, it's so weird. And so I thought it was so strange. Approved on the Women of Legend set was the Carrie Kelly Robins. So I did several Carrie Kelly Robins because I'm a huge fan of the Dark Knight Returns, the classic, you know, Frank Miller, Klaus Janson, Lynn Varley series. I always loved that series. And so I was just thought it was neat. So I seized the opportunity and drew Carrie Kelly. And I just always liked how this one turned out. This is in a little bit more cartoony style as opposed to that Captain Marvel one we saw before, which is very, very realistic and trying to represent that. And then this is a little bit more open and expressive and cartoony and fun, which I also like a lot. And I always thought this one turned out really great, you know, because you just sit down with a blank card and, you know, what are you going to come up with? And I always liked how this one turned out. So what do you think, Eric?
Yeah, I like it. I like it quite a bit, and it does surprise me, you know, when you're talking about the way that the companies determine which characters they're going to let you have. Yeah, I never would have thought they would let you do this one. You know, that just seems so strange to me because, you know, that this is basically a one-time use, you know, character. You know, so I guess two, right? There's a Dark Knight Returns too, but I mean, there was a sequel to Dark Knight Returns, wasn't there?
Yeah, there's been a couple. There's been a couple of series, and Carrie Kelly's come back a couple of times. But to me, it's just so weird because, you know, now we're headed into this place where we're going to do alternate realities for everything, and anything's game. But prior to the last several years, that's one of the things they didn't want you to do. They didn't want you to create confusion in the line. So that's one of the reasons you wouldn't normally be allowed to draw a character like Carrie Kelly. But when I saw she was on the approved list of characters, I couldn't miss that opportunity because how many chances am I going to get to draw Carrie Kelly? So I seized the day and drew the character. I think I did about 3 or 4 cards actually with her. And these are one of one. These are one of a kind. They don't print these. You draw them, they get turned in, they get randomly inserted into packs, and you never see them again. And it's just one of those cards I never saw again. I have never seen this one show up on eBay. The Captain Marvel from before, the Captain Flag, I've seen both of those actually. They were sold actually on eBay because sometimes people will see them be like, hey, is this your card? Hey, is this your head? Is this whatever? But this one,
that makes sense.
I've never seen this one anywhere. This one went into the system and could possibly still be sitting in an unopened pack of cards somewhere for all we know.
Oh, hopefully it's not bricked.
Who knows? It might be. It might be
terrible.
Might be ruined by now for all we know. So, but this was at the time a one-of-one original piece of art. So just like all these cards that we're talking about tonight, they're all original pieces of art. So that's number 8. Let's go ahead and go to number 7. All right. So this one's kind of interesting. This is another Rittenhouse set. This was Marvel's Greatest Battles. This actually, when you draw these cards, there's actually more to them because they actually cut them down. And then there's other card sets where the cards already pre-cut to the exact size and you're kind of drawing off the edges and stuff. But with this one, there's a lot of the card that actually gets kind of cut away and then it gets cut down the middle. And these are actually 2 separate cards. So if you can imagine, if you hold your hand up, you know, if you got the Wolverine card, you'd be missing part of his arm, but you could see that he's fighting Spider-Man because you could see Spider-Man's arm on there. And then the flip, if you did it the other side, you could see the other side and you would realize, oh, this must be Spider-Man fighting Wolverine because I can see the claws and the
Oh,
the
wow.
glove. And that's how these are supposed to be designed. They're supposed to be designed so that you can see a piece of the other character on the other card so that you'll go and try and search it out. How incredibly difficult it would be to put these together, I have no idea.
Yeah.
This is another two cards completed, went into the system. They were cut down. I know they were inserted. I have never seen either one of these at auction. These could be sitting in a box somewhere for all I know. But this is, of all the actiony battling type cards, I feel like this is probably the best one I have ever personally drawn. Whenever I share this one, it usually gets a lot of likes. People seem to really like it. And I always think about it very fondly. And when I drew this card, I was thinking of the Spider-Man versus Wolverine one shot that came out in the 80s. That's what I was thinking of when I drew this particular card. What do you think, Eric?
Well, David Mott says I like that one, and I agree with David Mott. Yeah, and I appreciate you to comment on the show, David. By the way, yeah, that's really interesting. The fact that you had to split this into two cards, because I definitely thought that was one card at first when we put it up there, and it would be kind of strange, I think, if you just had one side of this card.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure you would want to put it together, and as you mentioned, that seems like that would almost be like impossible. So, because it's one of a kind, right? So
yeah, it's basically it's a one of a kind piece, but that's why there's a signature over by Spider-Man and there's a signature over by Wolverine, and why the logo is repeated twice because it's cut down the middle. And the idea is that if you had one, you could at least tell who was on the other side if you wanted to try to search it out. I have no idea how incredibly difficult it would be to put these together. And like I said, once these left my drawing board, I've never seen either one of these again. I have no idea if they're in the system, if they're available. They could be bricked. They could have been burnt. They could have been floating in water in a flood. I have no idea what happened to this because I've never seen this come up anywhere. Some of them I can tell you what happened with them, but these particular two, just like the last one, no idea. No idea where they are.
So to answer David Mott's question, where do I place my bid? David Mott's, your guess is as good as anybody else's.
And it's weird for me because, like I said, a lot of times with this stuff, like you like to think it went to a good home and you want to know who owns it, right? I have no idea who owns these cards. No idea. And like I said, as far as I know, maybe no one does. They could be on a store shelf, still sitting in an unopened pack. I've never seen these come up to auction. No one's ever, because sometimes what happens is like people struggle to identify who the signature is. And then sometimes people will float it to me and they'll be, hey, is this yours? This looks like your work. Or, hey, is this your signature? And you end up kind of verifying it, which is why you find out sometimes what happens with these particular cards. These two of the best cards probably I've ever drawn in my life. I have no idea where they are. No idea what happened to them.
Yeah, that happens. That happens. And David Mott's questions, gutter? Damn.
It could be for all we know. All right, so let's go ahead and go to the next one.
All right, just 1 second there. All right.
Cool. All right. This is card number 6. Again, these are the 10 best sketch cards in my mind I've ever drawn. I really like how this one turned out just because it's weird, because this is kind of more the red skirts kind of a style. And I changed everything up on this set. This is the most recent card. This was actually drawn about a year or so ago. This is from 2020. This is the last sketch card set I've worked on. It was way early in the year too. I think it might have actually been January actually when these cards were done. And this is obviously Vampirella, which is obviously the naughty, seductive, sexual, blood-sucking vampire character. And I thought it would be really kind of funny to draw it in an almost, Archie, Betty, and Veronica kind of style.
Oh yeah.
I thought that might be kind of fun to do. So that was what I was thinking of. Obviously, I was still heavily involved doing stuff with red skirts. So some of that red skirt style is coming through as well. And then I wanted to try do something different with the process. So this is actually colored with color pencil as opposed to marker. Everything else that we've seen up until this point has been marker with a little bit of color pencil over top of it. This one is just color pencil.
Huh.
I was curious to see if it would provide a really different look. And it looks different, but I don't know if it looks terribly different from the other stuff I've done. And then you have to be careful with color pencil over ink work because sometimes it kind of blunts the ink work. So you almost kind of use it for an effect. But you got to be careful when you're coloring it because you can't really overwork it, or you end up just having to recolor the card and redo it almost essentially. Um, but I always really liked how this one turned out. I thought it was kind of neat. This is my favorite card actually from that set. And again, same thing. I've never seen this one show up at auction. I have no idea what happened to this one either. It could still be sitting in a pack for all I know. But I just always liked how this card turned out. When I think about the more recent cards I've done, this one always comes to mind. What do you think, Eric?
Yeah, I definitely went through a Vampirella phase. I actually had quite a few Vampirella books at one time, and can't remember exactly what era that was because obviously, Vampirella has gone through many years and all that kind of stuff. The character's been around for a while. Yeah, I definitely did go through a Vampirella phase, and I still have a few books somewhere, and this is cool. I like it. I dig it. I can see that what you were saying about that sort of that Betty and Veronica kind of vibe because I actually used to even collect some Betty and Veronica comics at one time too. So that's very cool. I like it, and I definitely like this style. It's the kind of style that I definitely like that I appreciate because I do like sort of that more cartoony kind of style. So
Yeah, I just thought this one was kind of neat how it turned out. Some of the cards towards the end of this set, I kind of fell back into the marker phase because while I liked the kind of breath of fresh air to my style that the color pencil provided initially, eventually I found it kind of frustrating and limiting. And so I went back to my usual style for the rest of the cards in this set. But this is one of the first cards I drew for this set, and I thought it turned out really kind of fun.
yeah, it turned out really well. I mean, I really wouldn't have known you did anything different. Just by looking at it casually, I wouldn't have realized that you did anything different than the other cards.
Cool. All right, so let's go ahead and go to the next one. This is, again, top 10, my personal favorite top 10 sketch cards that I've drawn. This is number 5. Obviously, this is not Guy Gardner. So it's like Guy Gardner. Obviously, this is Hal Jordan. This is from Cryptozoic's New 52 set. This is after the New 52 is brand new. And this is you can't tell, but it's got some of the new styling and detailing with the collar and stuff and everything from the Jim Lee redesign of the costumes that they had done at the time. And I, at the time, was actually working on books for New 52 while I was doing these sketch cards at the same time, which was kind of interesting because I was one of the few, maybe the only, I was either one of the few or the only actual artist who did sketch cards for this set who actually worked on the New 52 at the
Oh,
same
really?
time. Yeah. And it was really frustrating for me because I did the set because I thought that would be neat. I thought, like, as a fan, how cool I would think that would be. Like, if I pull one of these cards out, and it's like, oh, this is the guy who's working on blah, blah, blah. Because over at the New 52, Scott and I worked on a bunch of different books. I mean, we did Grifter, we did I Vampire, we did Mr. Terrific. Like, we worked on a whole bunch of books. Grifter obviously had the longest run, but we did a bunch of books over at New 52. We did covers for Stormwatch and Superboy and a bunch of other stuff. And so I thought that would be fun for me as a collector. Like, oh, that's cool because this guy actually worked on it. Because a lot of the other stuff for this set, including the base card set, a lot of the people that worked on that stuff, they didn't work on a new 52 book at all. Some of them did, but most of them did not. And so I thought that would be kind of fun. So yeah, and I thought this always turned out really good. I like Hal Jordan, Green Lantern, and I thought this was easily one of the best. There's a couple cards actually from this set in this list because I don't know what it was about when I was doing these particular cards, because some of the New 52 cards I did for this set look really, really great, like this one, and others of them look horrible, absolutely horrible. Like, I can't look at them anymore. But I thought this one turned out really good, and I've always liked this one a lot.
Well, David Mott says it's nice. He likes it. And then Jane also says awesome.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So let's go ahead and go to the next one. Let's go to card number 4. Card number 4, this is obviously Lex Luthor. This is sort of that Super Friends era Lex Luthor, but I kind of stylized it up a little bit, updated a little bit to make it look a little bit more realistic. I was trying to give him that sort of power mad, almost kind of crazed, mad scientist kind of look, which is the classic version of Lex Luthor I always think of. This is from Superman the Legend set. This is actually, if memory serves, this was the second set that I actually worked on for Cryptozoic, because Cryptozoics had the license to do trading cards for DC Comics for a long time now. But it was still kind of new to them, I think, when we did this particular set. And I did base cards actually for this set. This is another set I did base card art for. And I'm very happy to this day to still say I did the Superboy card actually from the Superman, the Legend set. I did the Superboy card. And I think that's really cool. And so, again, same thing. I was really in the zone. I thought this card turned out really great. I've always liked it. I was thinking he's like pushing some buttons to power up something in his gauntlet he's got there. He's going to shoot a kryptonite ray at Superman or something. And that's why there's a glowing green behind him. So I just thought it turned out really cool. And I've always liked this card. What do you think, Eric?
Yeah, I dig it a lot. I mean, Super Friends is like my bread and butter when it comes to DC superheroes and villains. The Legion of Doom, there's nothing that equals the Legion of Doom, and of course Lex Luthor was ahead of that. So I love that look. I love the classic look, and I do feel like you accomplished that goal if you kind of updated him a little bit, like you were saying, so he's not necessarily torn, from the animation cell of Hanna-Barbera or whatever. It's cool. And I have to say that I also like the way that they set up this particular cardstock with the little the Superman logo at the bottom, and it says hand-drawn artist sketch, because to me it almost like enhances the whole presentation of the piece, just having it like that, having the Superman symbol in the middle. It says hand-drawn artist sketch, so everybody knows exactly what this is when they see it, as opposed to just being kind of like, what is this? You know what I mean? Like, doesn't look like the other cards. It doesn't seem to match. You know what I mean? Because I could see some idiot doing that. So it conks you over the head, so you know exactly what it is you're looking at. It's a hand-drawn artist sketch, says it right there, and it's got the beautiful Superman logo. So I really like the presentation of these particular cards. You said, what company was it you said again that issued these particular cards?
This was Cryptozoic. And if memory serves, I believe these kind of little flourishes and touches like this was actually George Nadeau, who's since passed, who I got to be pretty friendly with over at Cryptozoic. And I actually worked with him. Actually, he was coordinating the very first set I worked on, the Golden Age of Comics set as well. And George really liked my work, and he kept bringing me back for things, which was really kind of fun. Wherever he went, he would bring me over. And, because of him, I got to work on a lot of these sets. And it goes back to that idea. They always talk about that it's networking and the people that who advance your career almost more than anything else. And,
sure.
George brought me along for a lot of stuff. And because of him, now that I get to work on, sets like this, like the Superman set, the Batman set, although twist his arm as much as I could, I didn't get to do base card art for the Batman set. So but beyond that, he actually got me on the Ghostbusters set too. So I got to work on the classic Ghostbusters as well because of that. And so George was a great guy, and I greatly, greatly miss him. And and it was interesting too. That was what was interesting about this too, because some of these characters on this set, Eric, we were only allowed to do the new 52 versions. And then there was others of them, they didn't care. Lex Luthor didn't care. So I immediately went for the classic Super Friends, style, because I could. If I can, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do the classic version over anything else. So
that's very cool. I like the way that turned out.
Very cool. All right. So let's go on to card number 3. This is this is a new 52. This was also a Cryptozoic set. And I have been a fan of Captain Atom as far back as I can remember. And of all the new 52 series that came out, I thoroughly loved the New 52 Captain Atom series. Over here on the shelf, I've got Volume 1 and Volume 2 of the collected. I've got a lot of the originals with the Stanley Art Germ Lau covers, which I love. And actually, you cannot see it from where you are, but over here on this wall is actually one of the splash pages from one of the early issues, actually, of Captain Atom, actually by Freddie Williams. It actually hangs on my wall. I'm a huge fan of Freddie Williams, and I loved his work on Captain Atom. I was really into this book when I got to work on these cards, and this was the one that I just had the most fun doing. And it's funny because this one's kind of more about rendering than anything else. There's drawing involved, but it's mostly about rendering. And I have always loved how this card turned out. I don't know, I just kind of was in the zone with this one. Always liked how it turned out. And this particular version of Captain Atom is a little different from the ones that most people are familiar with because his hair is almost kind of like a weird flame kind of thing, and there's a lot of glowing and energy and stuff. The best way to think of this series, the New 52 version of Captain Atom, is almost if Dr. Manhattan was in the DCU, the DC universe, which I know now the Watchmen characters kind of are. I don't exactly understand how that works, but the thing that made this series neat was that a lot of the Charlton characters inspired the Watchmen characters. So Captain Atom was the inspiration for Dr. Manhattan. So it was weird by the time you get to the New 52 and Dr. Manhattan is the inspiration for this particular portrayal of Captain Atom. It's the snake eating its own tail at some point, but I think that's kind of interesting to me. So, and I have always loved how this card turned out. So all the sketch cards I've done, and I've done, I don't even know how many thousands and thousands of sketch cards I've drawn. This is number 3 of my top 10 of all time that I've personally drawn. What do you think, Eric?
Well, it's interesting to me because I have almost no familiarity with the character whatsoever. It's just not a character that was ever much on my radar. But as far as like the piece itself, I really like the sort of stern look you have on his face. I really like that. I think it looks really cool. It does definitely evoke a little bit of that a little bit of the Manhattan thing, a little bit of that for me as well. But yeah, I definitely like the presentation of the face and just how powerful he looks and everything like that. So it's a cool piece. I like it.
Yeah, I've always liked how this one turned out. I was just kind of in the zone. Yeah. All right. So here we go, everyone. So the next two, number 2 and number 1, on any given day, they may change place. And they may change place because of the different approaches. Even though you're not going to immediately, most people won't be able to tell the difference between these two, but I can tell. So let's go ahead and go to number 2. Number 2, this is also from Dangerous Divas. Again, overall, if you were going to buy an entire, like if you were going to go out and collect Dave Beatty sketch cards, like if you wanted to do that, the Dangerous Divas set, that's the one to get. I went nuts on these. I labored over these cards. I photo referenced a lot of this stuff. Like I really, really went above and beyond because I don't feel like I draw women particularly well sometimes. And it's something I really struggle with. And I wanted these cards to look really good. So I put more effort and more time. And it's so funny because as much as I love Rogue, I did not want this to be the best Rogue card that I drew for that set. Now, what I did with these is there's a series of base poses because I photo referenced a lot of these. And then I really refined the line art, the construction of the figures, and then I would kind of dress them differently. So there's 4 Rogue cards in this set. And the 4 Rogue cards are the same pose. She's taking the glove off and she's reaching the hand out. She's actually flying. You can't tell because it's cut down. In some versions, she's running. In the other versions, she's flying. But she's reaching the hand out. The explosion in the background, Eric, I'm pretty sure you're thinking, that kind of reminds me of G.I. Joe, because that's exactly what I was thinking of when I did the explosion backgrounds. And all these cards, I was thinking of the blister pack art for the G.I. Joe action figures. And what was interesting about this one is I have never, let's see, I think they used this suit in Age of Apocalypse, But this costume is the costume I am least familiar with of all. Like I am the least familiar with this particular version of the Rogue costume, but this was the best Rogue card I drew, which always frustrated me because I did a classic '80s version, I did the '90s X-Men version, like I did all these different versions of the Rogue costume because there was 4 different versions, same pose, but it just always killed me because this one turned out the best, and this is the costume I was least familiar with. But on any given day, this is usually the best card I think I've ever drawn. But for this list, it's number 2, but it could easily be number 1. And this is one again. I know I've seen this one on some sketch card forums here and there, so I think this card is out there, but I currently have no idea where it is. But this is, in my mind, this is one of the best sketch cards I've ever drawn. What do you think, Eric?
It's interesting because you mentioned how even you don't have a lot of familiarity with this particular costume. I have none. I don't ever recall her wearing something like that. I never recall Rogue wearing something like that. And at first I didn't know who the character was. But it's like, I do love the fact that you do have the classic, she's taking the one glove off and she's like, approaching you, or approaching someone as she's about to touch them. So I really like that because that's Rogue, that's what definitely evokes her more than anything else. It's a really interesting costume. It does kind of make me in my own head kind of think like, where did she wear that, or where's something that I can find a good example of where she was wearing that. I've always myself, I always identify with the '90s cartoon, so I always like that look. That's my Rogue look for me. That's what I identify her with in my head. But it is cool. I do like the fact that again you have the glove coming off and that classic reach from Rogue as she's about to come out and touch you.
It's funny because there's 4 Rogue cards I did for this set. Again, they're all original pieces of art. They weren't printed. They're drawn directly on the card. There's only one of them of the different cards. And there was 4 Rogue cards I did for this set. This was the best one. Easily the most disappointing was the '90s outfit.
Oh.
I tried so hard to make that card look great that I destroyed it. I totally destroyed it. And then this card, which I was not very familiar with, I wanted it to be good, but I was kind of on autopilot with this card. I was kind of like, we'll do nice rendering, we'll do this, whatever. There's some happy accidents that kind of happened, kind of here and there, where the marker was bleeding, because the Rittenhouse paper stock, the Cryptozoic paper stock, and the Bragent paper stock that you're working on, completely different. The Bragent paper stock, Bragent always had the best paper quality. Like the stuff they would give you to draw on was absolutely great. The Rittenhouse stuff sometimes was the stuff that I would equate not toilet paper, but headed in that direction. It was pretty poor paper quality. The cards still looked great. They still turned out great, but just the paper quality on the Rittenhouse stuff was awful, in my personal opinion. The Cryptozoic stuff early on, it was better and seemed to kind of improve, and then so it's kind of hit or miss with their stuff. Initially, it was pretty good. And it was good for most of the run, but some of the later stuff was a little dodgy here and there. But Rittenhouse absolutely had the worst, in my opinion. The paper was just awful. So there's a little bit of happy accidents that happen with this. And it's weird because some of this stuff that I like to do, like these explosions in the background, you can tell the difference between how the better paper blended and then the paper that doesn't blend as well. Let's go ahead and go to card number 1. This is my favorite sketch card I've drawn of all time. And you can see the difference in the background. The explosion has a little bit softer transition than the other one. And it's just because the paper quality is better. This is also Cryptozoic. This, for me, in my humble opinion, is the best sketch card I've ever drawn. It is more cartoony. It is more expressive than the last one. It wasn't photo referenced. The only thing I was thinking of is I was just thinking of that classic Superman, because that's what I was trying to do, is to do the 19, like the kind of mid to late 1940s, early 1950s style Superman is before they fully refined the S. So it's the more triangular style. The ribbing on the cuffs, like on the sleeves, like the idea is just to do that classic version of Superman. This was from Superman the Legend. I drew a lot of Superman cards for this set, but this, in my opinion, is the best one. There is only one of these that exists in the world. I have no idea where this card is. But if I could have one of the cards that I've drawn in my collection, that I've drawn to still keep in my collection, the cards I agonize over the most is this one, that Rogue one, and that Captain Atom one. Those are the ones I always think back in my head. Man, if I get my hands on them again, I'd love to have them in my collection. I love how this card turned out. This is Golden Age classic Superman through and through. The smile, the pose, the whole thing. Even though it's not Adventures of Superman, I was thinking of the George Reeves, mild-mannered reporter working at the Metropolitan, fights a never-ending battle for truth, justice, and I was thinking of that, kind of scene. But yeah, this is my favorite one. What do you think, Eric?
I love it. I mean, you can't go wrong with Superman. He is the classic. He is the standard by which all other superheroes are judged. And it's a great looking card. I love it. I think it looks awesome. It's definitely the kind of thing that I would, if it was blown up, I would, like to hang up on my wall. That's I dig it. And again, I also like the way that they set up these cards with the bottom there, where it just says right there for everybody to see. This is a hand drawn artist sketch. So they knock you right over the head with it, so you know exactly what it is, and that beautiful Superman logo in the middle. So I just like that whole presentation for the item, and it also gives it something. It makes it feel like it's more like official, and it's more like it's not some sort of bootleg or something like that. It makes it feel that it is like this official product, and a one of a kind at that. So
yeah,
I think it's very cool.
Yeah, one of a kind. And what's interesting too is that I actually worked on a Batman set, and some of the Batman cards turned out pretty nice. The Nightwing card's nice. The Tim Drake Robin card is nice. The Golden Age Batman card is pretty nice. But when I look back on those cards, all I see are the mistakes. And it's just like the rogue cards I was talking about before. Like when it's something I care about, I want to have look a certain way, I struggle with it the most. And sometimes happy accidents, other times just unfortunate mistakes. And when I look back on those Batman cards, as much as I wanted them to be good, as much as I wanted them to be great, they're just not. And so when I compile the 10 best sketch cards I've ever drawn out of thousands and thousands and thousands, this in my mind, the more I think about it, the classic pose, the smile, the kind of the storytelling, like the costume, like it's just, to me, the rendering, whatever, like I just feel like when I think back on it, I feel like this is probably the best sketch card I've ever drawn. So this is number one. Although you asked me on a different day, that Rogue one that was number two, these two might be a little interchangeable, the Rogue and the Superman. But there you go. I thought it, and part of what led me down this, Aaron and I have been talking a lot about doing a project and doing something. And I want to do like another comic book. Like I really want to do one. So maybe there'll be an announcement, sometime in the future about something we might try and do. But also too, I've been thinking about, I'm still available. Like if someone wants a commission, you want freelance, you have a book, something, whatever, obviously you can contact me. I'm happy to help you with that. But I haven't worked on a big two thing in a very, very long time. And it just feels like that part of my career and that part of my life is basically over. And so this is almost kind of like a post-mortem for that too. I feel like that these days are done. And I wanted to kind of think about that, and I've been going through some transitions or some different things going on in my life and stuff, and it's been having me think about the past a lot, and the idea of leaving things behind, that maybe this is over. Talk too about how sometimes when we talk about some of the projects and stuff here on the show, it's not as much fun to talk about the big two stuff anymore, and maybe leaving that behind, right? So that's kind of what I've been thinking about a lot. So this is kind of a post-mortem for this stuff, because I just don't see myself returning to this kind of work ever again as it currently sits. So there you go. If I thought talk about it one last time, one last hurrah, that's going to be it for me talking about probably sketch cards. But if you're a collector, if you own any of these top tens, count yourself lucky, because in my opinion, you've got the creme of the creme. You've got the best of the best. Like these 10, these are the best I've ever drawn, in my opinion, on sketch cards. And this is for me, this is the number one. So if you've got this one, this is a good find.
Yeah,
so,
I dig it too. I think it's really cool. I think it came out really, really well.
Cool. All right. Well, let's move on then. That's my contribution on that end. Eric, what do you have for Collector's Corner for this week?
I don't really have anything specifically for Collector's Corner this week, and unfortunately, I just really didn't come up with anything. So everything that I have is related to pop culture news.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, what do we want to do up first for pop culture tonight? I mentioned to you some of the things I kind of wanted to talk about. You said you wanted to talk about them too, so I already applied them at the beginning of the show. We're obviously going to talk about the Matrix trailer. We're probably going to talk about the Injustice trailer. I don't know which one that you want to do first.
Well, we both want to talk about Matrix, so I'll go ahead and bring that up, because I've got an article ready to bring up for that. Not that there's necessarily a lot to have an article about, but it's a trailer, so it is what it is. But this is from the Hollywood Reporter, and it is dated today, September 9th, 2021, by Ryan Parker. And the headline reads, "The Matrix Resurrections stuns with first trailer." The Warner Brothers franchise installment will be released theatrically and on HBO Max on December 22nd. Kind of interesting because, of course, Warner Brothers is releasing all of their films this year, both theatrically and HBO Max. And, of course, this film is going to qualify, even though it's coming in at December 22nd. So it'll be on both. Article says The Matrix Resurrections dropped its first trailer Thursday morning, and the tease was eye-popping with astonishing visuals that fans have come to expect from the beloved sci-fi franchise. I just have to say, I have to take a step back. Doesn't that sound like shill reporting to you? I mean, it's just, it doesn't sound genuine. It sounds like an advertisement. It doesn't sound like reporting. What do you think, Dave?
Well, to me, the most interesting thing that they did actually was in the lead up to the first trailer, because if you went to the website, it was kind of neat because you got to pick your experience, and they had the red pill and the blue pill. Okay. And based upon which one of the pills that you picked, you got a different version of a teaser for the trailer. You got the standing character for Morpheus, and that had more the real world stuff. And then if you pick the blue one, you got more of the Matrixy stuff with Neil Patrick Harris. And it was timed out so that whenever you picked it, it would say the only thing that matters is the time, and it would tell you the time that you're actually watching the trailer. So that was really cool. So I felt like that was very inventive. It was very kind of, you're in the Matrix kind of thing. But I could see what you're saying, Eric, because to be honest with you, while I liked the trailer and I am intrigued, and I will definitely go see this movie when it comes out, because the original Matrix movie for me is one of the best action movies probably ever committed to film. I mean, the first Matrix movie to me is that great. I remember it just at that time in my life too. I was very heavily involved with martial arts when the original Matrix movie came out. That whole scene with Morpheus and Neo, spoiler alert, can't imagine you haven't seen the original Matrix, but that original scene with Neo and Morpheus fighting in the dojo was absolutely incredible. I love that line. It's like, oh, you think that's air you're breathing now? So that whole scene to me was incredible as someone who was so heavily involved in martial arts at the time. Um, so I love the original Matrix movie. And his new trailer is great. It's interesting because this new trailer to me at times I think is almost more polished than the original Matrix movie was. But I don't know if it's as astounding visually speaking as the original Matrix trailer really puts you on your heels because it seemed so real, yet they were doing completely unbelievable, crazy things, and then you had to know, well, what is the Matrix then? What is it? I don't understand what I'm seeing. What is this? The bullet time thing was new. Like all that stuff was so groundbreaking that you had to go to the movie theater to find out what the Matrix is. My concern with this movie, in all honesty, is even though it looks like it's at times better shot, there's some more artistic choices being made, and it'll probably be good. I want to see it. My fear is I don't understand how this can be as mind bending as the original was, because that's what the original is. I mean, what do you think, Eric?
No, I think you. I don't know how you feel about the other two Matrix movies, but I was disappointed. I'm not going to sit here and poo-hoo the original Matrix in any way because it was groundbreaking. I was just like anybody else when I saw that in the theater. I was mesmerized, from beginning to end, and thought it was a fantastic movie. But in a lot of ways, I feel like it's the case of a franchise that never really knew where it was supposed to be going, and just kept trying to do the same thing over and over again, bigger and quote unquote better. Bigger is not always better. It doesn't work. And I just don't think that there was enough meat in terms of the story and in that world of what they had envisioned originally when they came up with this. There just wasn't enough meat left on the bone to really go anywhere or do anything with it. To me, it just started to get by the last movie, you're like, what the hell is even going on? And I feel like that right now with the trailer, what the hell is going on? Because aren't these characters dead? So why are they in this movie? So I'm not going to take anything away from the original Matrix. It is like a cornerstone, in terms of groundbreaking cinematography. There's just no doubt about that. They basically perfected, if not invented, certain techniques that are still used to today and we take for granted. So it has that same sort of pedigree as like Star Wars or something in that regard. And I did think that the first story was interesting, and I thought there were all sorts of little things that they did in there, like with deja vu and all these little things that you have in your head that you're like, well, why is it that way? And it's like, oh, it's because you're in the Matrix. It's because it's not real, that kind of a thing. I thought that was inventive. But I really felt they just had nowhere to go with it after that. And I thought the other two movies were just not impressive to me. They were just standard action fare. You know what I mean? You could just insert action movie here, especially in the post-Matrix era. And when I say the post-Matrix era, I mean the first Matrix, because everybody else started to copy that, including everybody that did spoofs of it. I mean, it got spoofed like crazy to the point that it was like that whole twirl around thing was just like, it almost became laughable because it was so parodied and it was so overused and all that kind of stuff, because it was just like a cornerstone of the pop culture at the time. But I'm not seeing anything in this trailer that really like says to me groundbreaking and astounding and I need to be a shill and all that kind of stuff like these guys are. I know there's a lot of people excited about it, but again, I'm still sitting here like, aren't these people dead? So how the hell are they in the movie? That's where I'm at right now. I'm still there. I'm just like, I'm not past that. I'm like, aren't they dead? Why are they in this movie?
Well, and the thing for me too is like Lawrence Fishburne did not come back. And one of the best characters in all of the Matrix movies actually is Morpheus. Like Morpheus is Lawrence Fishburne's line delivery, his portrayal of that character. He has potentially one of the most powerful fight scenes, not the dojo scene, but the scene where he actually tries to sacrifice himself for everyone, and actually for Neo, where he fights Agent Smith.
Yeah.
That scene is so powerful.
That's
and
a great
the choreography
scene.
Is great. Like, and so for me, that's the big kind of shocker for me. Is like, well, if Trinity is still alive, how is Morpheus gone? Like, should Morpheus be back too? Like, I'm a little I don't, and there's a lot of things about that first Matrix.
And by the
movie
way,
too.
I'm gonna say it. Don't you feel that they're kind of doing like a Morpheus light thing in the trailer? It's very obvious down to the visuals. Same race,
Yeah.
he's bald, very similar look, just younger. I'm like, come on. It almost feels like just insert black guy here, and that's pandering.
Well,
you know what I mean? That to me is, in terms of all the racial sensitivity that's out there, how is that not called out? How is that not called out by anybody? I mean, I just think that's crazy. I just because it glares at me when I see it. I'm just all like, come on, seriously.
Well, and the thing for me,
why couldn't we gender swap or race swap that one? At least to make it different, because now it just seems like you're just pandering at that point.
Well, and I was going to say that to me is probably the most questionable choice, just because it's gonna really hinge upon the story, because at times the trail looks like we're going to relive the events of the first movie. So if you do it in the right way, if you have an interesting hook, it'll work with the Matrix, because that's the deja vu concept is so strong. And at the end of the last Matrix movie, there is an opening that could potentially lead us to where this movie might be starting. But that being said, I feel like the absence of Morpheus is so overwhelming for me in this trailer
it's huge.
That's the biggest thing, because to me, besides, Keanu Reeves is great as Neo. I don't take anything away from Neo. Neo is really great, but the two characters I love the most, actually, from the first Matrix movie, is Trinity and Morpheus. They were the two biggest surprises for me. And also, too, when you realize that they don't have the abilities that Neo potentially has, they're also in the most jeopardy in the three films. They're the characters that, even though they can do these amazing things, they take one wrong step and they could die. And so for me, they were the most interesting standout characters in the films. They're the ones I was most curious about.
See, the one I really liked was Agent Smith, and he's not in this either.
Yep.
And that's something that really,
to
me,
Agent
is
Smith
like, I don't see how
yep.
this can even work. At this point,
so
I'm almost like, with the way that there's so many reboots these days, so many remakes, I'm almost like, why didn't they just go that route and just completely recast it and just redo it? Why is Keanu Reeves in it?
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's going to really depend upon the story and the choices they've made, because there is the potential there could be an interesting mind-bending twist that really works and fits within the Matrix universe. But then I also feel like, too, in all honesty, there also is the potential that this could just be a huge miss, just a big misstep. Like, for example, to me, the most interesting part of this entire trailer, I hate to say this, is the scene where Neo's in the elevator and they're all looking at their cell phones. Because the cell phone today versus what a cell phone was when the original Matrix movie was made are two completely different concepts. And they're completely different things. Like, just those devices are such different things. And that's where I'm like going, okay, there might be something interesting that could be said about contemporary culture, connectivity to the internet. Like there's a lot of room to ask interesting questions and present interesting ideas that works within the context of the Matrix and our modern society and even pop culture. Like there's a lot of room to say some stuff. But the question is, when I watch this trailer, I'm like going, there's a lot of potential here. But as we've seen with a lot of things recently, potential doesn't immediately equal success. Potential doesn't immediately equal great movie. So that's my concern, is that when I look at this, I'm like going, potential, where the hell is Morpheus? And that's all I could think of watching this trailer is, where the hell is Morpheus? And yeah, there's a lot of interesting ideas, but
and Agent Smith, where's Agent Smith again? So it's like, I don't know. I'm gonna say, for me, I'm just not that impressed by the trailer. I don't think there's anything really new here. I think it's confusing. I think the whole brand is kind of weird at this point. That's just me.
Well, there you go. I'm excited to see it, but I'm a little nervous because, like I said, that first movie is so great, and that first trailer for that movie was so great, and there's just so many interesting things from that first movie because of the time in which that movie came out and because the time in which that movie existed. Like it was a moment in time, and I'm just not sure that you can just rebottle that moment in time and give us that same experience. I just, when you look at the like just the style, just the clothing choices, the weird retro tech in a contemporary society, like I don't see that stuff in this trailer. This looks to me like it's got more poignant cinematography and better atmospherics, and like it's an upgrade visually at times in this trailer, but beyond that I'm just not sure if this is going to be able to capture that moment in time that the original Matrix movie was.
Yeah,
But I'll see it.
I'm just gonna guess no. I'm just gonna go out on a limb and say no. And just remember, you know, all that great setup for the original Matrix movie, and what we ended up with was a big long dance scene. So, hey.
Well, and I like. let me just say, the first movie is classic. I enjoyed the other two movies, you know, that came after that finished out the Matrix trilogy, but all the crazy conversations I had with my friends after that first movie, and there was that Psychology of the Matrix book that people were reading and dissecting. Like, for all that build up, the last two movies were pretty much action movies, and I don't feel like they really explored the potential. And that's what I'm saying. It's like this new film, maybe that's what this new film will do. Maybe it will get into the minutia, and it'll be a more cerebral film with great action sequences in it. But I don't know. The jury's out. The jury's out.
2021. Yeah, I believe that. I'm sorry. I'm just way too cynical at this point. So,
yeah.
But we'll see. I guess I could be proven wrong. I think some people are going to like it regardless, just because they haven't seen The Matrix in a long time, and they're just happy about a new Matrix movie, and they like Keanu Reeves. So it's going to be as simple as that for a lot of people. But I'm not one of those people.
So those of you in the Rogues Gallery,
I'm not the targeted audience, I don't think.
Yeah, so those of you in the Rogues Gallery, I mean, chime in. You know, tell us what you think. Are you excited about this new Matrix movie? You know, even if you're watching this in the replay, leave a comment. Yeah, leave a comment. Let us know.
I'd love to hear your comments about that. Because what I'm hearing, and this Shill article, you know, that's why I have it up there, is like, oh, everybody's excited about this. This is great. This is going to be the best thing ever. And I'm sitting here again. I'm still sitting here. And if you're a Matrix fan, you should be able to answer me. How the hell are they in this when they're dead? I still don't get it. I'm sorry. I just don't get it.
Well, and this to me, it's interesting because I'm seeing a lot of people right now the early reactions and stuff is coming out for Dune. Like, I'm very excited for the new Dune movie. And now that information's coming out, it sounds like it's pretty heir apparent that the Dune movie doesn't even complete the first story arc from the first book.
That's what I've heard, is, you know, it's obviously meant to be like a trilogy or something like that. So, yeah, I think that's going to be very disappointing to a lot of people.
Yeah,
so
that's that kind of goes along with this Matrix thing. It's like there's a lot of potential here. You know, you've got great actors, you've got great staging, you've got great cinematography, you've got great special effects. It's a beloved thing. The Matrix is a beloved franchise, just in the same way that Dune is a beloved franchise, highly celebrated books, probably more than a franchise. But you see what I'm saying? Like, yeah, potential, but it's all about how you stick that landing. You know, are they going to be able to stick that landing? For example, my wife and I went out and we saw Shang Chi, however you're supposed to say it. I guess you're supposed to say Shang Chi now. We saw that actually at the movie theater last weekend, and you know, I liked it. I thought it was good. I don't know if it's the best Marvel movie I've ever seen, but I liked it. I thought it was good, but it at times left me with an awful lot of questions. But they also had to change that material a lot to make that movie as well. It's very different from the comics that I've read over the years. So, but it was still good. But at least they were able to stick the landing, so most people were happy with it. But you run that risk with Dune and with this Matrix movie. Can you stick the landing? That's
Right.
the trick.
That's always the trick. At least with Dune, the one thing is they just have to not screw it up because they already have a story that's laid out for them. So if they do mess it up, it's just truly their fault. They meaning Hollywood, because
Yeah.
it's a story that's tried and true. Matrix is interesting because it was something that was new, at least when it first came out. I just think they never did anything with it. That's my whole premise, is that I didn't like 2 or 3. They were passable. Well, 3 is not even passable to me. 2 was passable. It was like 2 was okay. As far as I could watch it, it was enjoyable. 3 is just gobbledygook as far as I'm concerned. But we do have some other opinions. And Jane says, not sure they can recreate the same moments that the original had. And I think we're in total alignment right there, Jane. And again, when I say original, I just mean the original movie too. I'm not even getting into 2 or 3 because I just think it went downhill the entire time. Just don't think they knew what they were doing. I don't think it was well plotted out, and I don't think they were able to, basically move on their feet as well as say George Lucas was, because George Lucas didn't have everything planned out either. He changed things throughout as he was doing it, but he was better at doing that than a lot of these other people are. It's hard to do that. A lot of people don't realize that. It's hard to do that and make it successful, because even Star Wars is a good example. A lot of stuff doesn't make sense because it doesn't quite fit right. Like Luke kissing Leia. Lucas wouldn't have done that if he knew they were brother and sister. He just didn't know that. He just added it later. David Mott says, I'll watch it, but I don't expect it to be as good as number 1. The bar is high. And again, I agree with that sentiment, David Motts. Again, I think number 1, I'm not going to take anything away from number 1. If anything, I think the filmmakers took away from number 1 with all these sequels. And I feel like there's a good chance this one's going to be in the same line as that. It's just going to dilute the first specialness. So
the first movie to me is so classic that I almost would equate it to what we've seen with the Terminator franchise. The first Terminator movie is really great. Terminator 2 is like a classic. Like I would say that's a classic on the same level that The Matrix is a classic.
A lot of people argue Terminator 2 is better than Terminator 1. I mean, that's one of those things that's where you really get the high praise, because Terminator is, I think, almost universally regarded as a classic. And the fact is, lots of people will argue with you that Terminator 2 is a far superior film to Terminator. And I would actually agree with a lot of them, because in terms of the special effects and even the storytelling and just the advancement of the story, I think that argument can be made. And that's what makes such a great film. I don't think The Matrix is ever in danger of having one of its sequels eclipse it as being a better film. I just don't see it happening.
I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is this. They run the risk that the Terminator franchise has run into with the sequels that fail to impress.
Right.
Whether it's Rise of the Machines, Salvation, Genesis, it doesn't matter. Dark Fate.
Terminator's kind of gotten ridiculous at this point. So
yeah, I mean, and that's what I'm saying. There is so much potential to bring the Matrix back and to do that mind-bending exploration about what is reality and what is free will and what is preordained, and like there's all these interesting ideas that
if they did more stuff like deja vu, like everything tastes like chicken, if they had done more of that kind of stuff and focused on that, I think they could have had something really special. But that's not what they focused on. Instead, they got into the whole BS of the architect, and then the what was the lady? There's the architect, right? He's the guy. And then the lady is
yeah.
What is she? Do you remember what she is?
Darn it.
See, you can't even remember. That's what I'm saying.
The Oracle.
But it took you a while. That's my point. Nobody gives a shit about that stuff. You know what I mean? It's just stupid. It's just superfluous nonsense that they put in there to make it kind of seem like it's, I don't know. I don't even know what they're trying to make it seem. Confusing? It's supposed to be like... It's the idea, right? It's supposed to be like some great philosophical thing that's going on. It's like, No, why don't you focus on the things like everything tastes like chicken, the deja vu, because those are actually things that you can kind of explain, right? And that's why they're like that, because it's a matrix. It's not real. You know what I mean? So the computer only has so many taste options. So everything tastes like chicken. It makes sense to me, and it's creative. It's creative. It's a creative way to deal with those kind of problems that we all can relate to. But when you get into the Oracle and the Architect and all this stupidity, and now they're not dead, and well, they were never dead. Oh, come on. I'm sorry. It's just getting stupid. Just getting silly at that point. Jane says, I'm going to have to take the blue pill to watch this new one.
Well, and that's the thing. The first movie is so great because it has so many really you've got the scene with where Morpheus presents Neo with the choice between the two pills. You've got all the incredible action sequences. I mean, the big ones for me is the scene in the dojo, and then when they're uploading information into their minds, and you realize that's how they're able to do all these things. There's just so much great stuff, to the scene where they decide they're going to go and rescue Morpheus after he has that killer fight with Agent Smith, where they're trapped in that building where all the exits are closed off when Cypher betrays them. Like, there's so much great stuff in that first movie, and so many just really cool scenes too. Like it's like, what do you need? So we need guns. We need lots of guns. Like there's just so much great stuff in that first Matrix movie. It's just, when I watched this trailer, I remember when I saw them filming this, because there was a lot of footage coming out with Trinity and Neo on a motorcycle riding around, and they were shooting these shots. And all I could think of is like, what in the hell does this have to do with the Matrix? And then we see some of that footage in the trailer, and the footage doesn't look bad, but all I could think of is like, man, you are so far removed from that really awesome car with the suicide doors and all that stuff, and the retro tech telephone, and and the long black coats and the sunglasses. Like all that style is just missing from this, and it's because it's been parodied so much they can't do it now. Yeah. But to me, it's just, I feel like it's a shame, because I think of that as being that visual style of the Matrix, and I feel like that's one of the things that's missing. So,
yeah, definitely.
All right, very cool. All right, well, let's go ahead and move on to our next thing. We wanted to talk about the Injustice trailer, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
All right, cool. So, on the other side of this, they released the first trailer for Injustice. This is the animated film that is based off of the video game. Now, I have never played the video game, but I'm very familiar with the story, because they adapted that story into a comic book form that they took from the video game. And that comic book series was so popular, it went through like multiple versions, and they really kind of explored and fleshed out that whole world. And a lot of this stuff comes from that idea that actually comes from the Mark Waid, Alex Ross series Kingdom Come, which is the idea that, spoiler alert, everyone, you can see it in the trailer. If you watch the trailer, it's in the trailer. The Joker kills Lois Lane, and that puts Superman on this knife's edge, where he realizes the only way that the world is going to have order is if he forces the world to have order. Because he is so tortured and heartbroken over the death of Lois Lane and his unborn child, which they actually show you that in the trailer, that he is unable to take a step back and be the kind of Superman that we know. And he becomes a more totalitarian enforcer and decides to bring the world to order. And that puts him basically in direct conflict, obviously, with other members of the Justice League. And people start, drawing lines and allegiances, and everything just kind of spirals out of control. And that's where you get the Injustice story. So I saw this trailer. I've only watched this trailer just like the Matrix trailer. I only watched it once. I thought it looked pretty good. My only thing with this kind of stuff I keep coming back to is when they take a video game and they adapt it into a different form, and then they put it into 2D animation. I don't understand why they just don't try to animate the CG characters and have it have the same kind of realistic feel. Maybe there's a cost thing there. I don't know what the deal is with that. I'm always surprised that they're not exploring that style more. I mean, what do you think, Eric? I mean, do you think it's kind of
That's an interesting point, and it's funny because I don't necessarily hear a lot of gamers necessarily make that complaint, but you would think that they would. You definitely would think that they would. Now, I actually have my copy right here of Injustice because I knew we were going to be talking about that. So I do have the game, but full disclosure here, I sucked at it and I didn't finish it. I really wanted to because I wanted to finish the story, but I suck at it. I'm terrible at fighting games because I'm not any good at the button combinations and things like that. I'm a masher. I basically just mash buttons and it only gets you so far. And I think it was actually Black Adam. I can't get past him. He's too tough for me. So, but it's an interesting story. But the problem that I have with it at this point is I almost feel like they waited too long because we've already seen this with the Snyder Cut, and we've already kind of seen it, I guess, in Lois and Clark, right? So it's like, is it too late at this point? Because it seems like everybody else has already jumped on this. Let's make Superman into an evil being thing. Seems like it's old news.
It's interesting too, because I feel like this concept of the evil Superman has kind of run its course. And I'll draw a different comparison. I'll bring out The Boys, because Homelander on The Boys, I mean, that is very much the evil Superman idea. Now, there's different permutations of this, whether you want to talk about Homelander, whether you want to talk about Plutonian from the was it Irredeemable? I think it's Irredeemable series. I actually worked on that series. I can't remember the name of it. It's really bad. But, there are this concept of the evil Superman gone wrong is a concept that's interesting. But I kind of feel like you, Eric. I mean, I feel like maybe this idea has kind of been done to death at this point. And to an extent, I feel like this is a concept that the general audience has told us they don't like. People did not like that idea in Batman v Superman. There were people that pushed back on this concept, even in the Snyder cut of the Justice League. I don't feel like people like this idea of the Superman gone wrong. So that being said, the trailer looks nice. I mean, I'll watch it. I'm curious to see it. But for me, the biggest off-putting thing, besides what you bring up, Eric, which I think is a great point, like is, are people done with the evil Superman idea? But beyond that, for me, the biggest thing is, why don't they actually try to do this in a video game style? Where, like, for example, I remember when they were doing all the Batman Arkham games, one of the coolest things I've ever seen still was they had, it was a sequence that was Batman versus Deathstroke the Terminator. And part of the reason I regret that we didn't get to see the Ben Affleck Batman movie that he was making, where you were going to have Deathstroke the Terminator versus Batman, which is what was being reported, was because, man, that stuff that they released as publicity for that game where Batman was fighting Deathstroke the Terminator was so killer. And I just don't know why they don't do that with this. I mean, this is coming from the video game. If it was done in that style, maybe they could update it a little bit or make a few tweaks here or there. But I think that would be the way I would like to experience it. I mean, me personally, that's, to me, is the thing that is the most off-putting, is just the stylistic approach.
Yeah, I could see that, and again, it's I'm interested because I don't necessarily hear that criticism more often, and you kind of felt like you would, but in all honesty, I don't know if this film has enough of a profile to even get people upset, Dave. That could be kind of the other side of it, is because a lot of these animated movies, let's just face it, they're kind of relegated to the straight to DVD dust pile, right? I mean, that's just the truth of it, regardless of how good the films actually are. So I think you might have a little bit more of a reaction if this was sort of on that sort of A tier, in terms of like, recognizability and everything, and also being pushed the same way as Matrix. You know what I mean? If it was like up on that same sort of pedestal, maybe you would get that kind of backlash. But I think a lot of people, that the people that this is meant for, the people like, hey, just be happy we made something for you. You know what I mean? Just be happy you got something. So,
well, and along those lines, here's the reason. Sorry, I thought I got something in my eyes. Here's the reason that this really bothers me the most. When they first started doing these direct to DVD animated features, I remember being in the room at San Diego Comic-Con when they announced they were going to start doing them. And the goal was they were going to take these established storylines and they were going to make an attempt to adapt them in a similar style so that when you're watching the animated film, it feels very much like what you'd read.
Like the book coming on screen.
Yeah, exactly. The graphic novel come to life, right?
Yeah.
Like that was the whole point. And I'll never forget this because this directly goes back to the fact that from the jump with this stuff, something was off. When they did the Doomsday, one of the first ones, the Doomsday, it looked like Batman, the Superman animated series, but then they were adapting the graphic novel series and they took all these side characters out. Booster Gold's missing, Blue Beetle's missing, Fire's missing, Ice is missing, because the Justice League that we had at that time was the last permutation of the Bwahaha Funny Justice League that was a hallmark of that era Justice League, and when Doomsday walked through them and basically put most of them in a coma and just messed some of them up so bad that they could never be superheroes again. All those characters, like right off the gate, they go, we're going to try to bring the graphic novel to life. And here's the first one. We've changed almost all of it. It's almost unrecognizable, but you're going to love it. And that was my problem with it. And then the next few things they do after were actually really good. Like New Frontier is so great because it's so faithful to the storyline and to Darwin Cook's artwork, and it's so great. And then from then on, it's real hit or miss. I know some people liked Crisis on Infinite Earths, other people hated it. Was it Crisis on Two Earths or whatever the hell the name of it was? The one with the Injustice gang. Some people liked it, some people didn't like it. But then you got Under the Red Hood. Under the Red Hood is really great. And it's just this weird hodgepodge of things where it's like what they said they were going to do and what they did doesn't quite line up. And I feel like this is another great example of that because it's the exact same thing. This comes from a video game. We're going to adapt that video game story that you love so much. We're going to give you a film, but it's almost unrecognizable from the game that you played, but it's the same story, right? Like you like that, right? Like, and that's the part about this, the DC direct to whatever it is streaming stuff now that bothers the hell out of me. It's kind of like, hey, it's just like that thing. We just changed almost all of it, but you're going to love it. And then there's others of them that are like Year One is so faithfully adapted. It is so great. It feels like Mazzucchelli's artwork come to life. Year One is so great. Dark Knight Returns is really great. At times it feels very much like the Frank Miller story come to life. Darwin Cook's New Frontier, so great. It's like it came to life. And then other ones, the Superman Doomsday, I don't know. This other one over here, I don't know. Like, and that's the thing that's really weird. And this falls into that same place. It's like, I don't know, because it just doesn't look right to me.
Yeah, I can understand that. I can definitely understand that. It doesn't look like the game. There's no doubt about that. So it's definitely very, very different. David Motz mentions that he is a fellow button masher. So I'm curious, David Motz, if you have a little bit of insight into that as well, as far as if you've seen the trailer, if you think it's, if you're kind of getting on Dave's vibe as well, as far as it just being very different than the visual style of the game. And then David Motz also said that it feels like a what if series. in a lot of ways. It feels like a what if series, and Injustice in a lot of ways that is what it is. I mean, that is the nature of what Injustice is. That's what the whole premise of the game in the first place. That whole idea, basically Superman going bad, kind of a thing. So it is a what if. I mean, that is actually what the series is. So that's fair. That's definitely fair.
And for me, there's so many great, like, in my mind, seminal, still celebrated, still talked about, beloved graphic novel series that DC has never even attempted to touch. Golden Age. Golden Age is so great. I mean, Golden Age will make a great animated film done in an animated style. We've got the Rock Black Adam movie coming up. Black Rain, such a great storyline with such a great character. There's so much really, truly tremendous material. Alan Moore's Swamp Thing, the fact that they've never attempted, we had that one series that was made for the DC universe, but beyond that, they've never really ever attempted to adapt that material. And that material would be really great in an animated film, I feel. And they could do it where it's R-rated and for an older, kind of mature kind of an audience, and really get into that kind of horror vibe. Like, I mean, there's so much really, really great material in the DC universe that they could do stuff with, that sometimes the material they select to adapt, which I feel Injustice is great material to adapt. But there's been other things that they've done. Like, for example, it feels like they spent like a decade adapting the New 52, and I feel like no one cared. Like, and that's hard for me to say because they adapted Flashpoint, and I worked on Flashpoint, and that's really kind of cool, and I'm glad they did that. But and grifters in it and whatever, and that's cool, but they also, it's ironic, they changed almost everything about the Wonder Woman stuff, which Scott and I worked on. Almost all of it changed. They redesigned everything, and they changed the story in a really bad way to where it makes Wonder Woman's betrayal even weirder. Like it was already kind of questionable in the first place, but when you see the events unfold in the story, you go, oh, okay. And then they made it so weird in Flashpoint that you're like, what? I remember literally audibly saying, what? While I was watching it. And I worked on it. Not the animated film, but the original story. I'm like, what? Like, why did you do that? That makes no sense. So that's the problem with the direct to streaming DVD stuff that the DC Universe DC people have been doing for years. There's all this really great material. Their selection material is questionable. Their choices questionable. And with this, I'll watch it. I'm excited to see it. The material is worthy of being adapted. My only question is, maybe you could have made it look more like the video game. So, and then the funny thing is, the funny thing about this, Eric, is if they'd had, I don't know if they're going to do it behind the scenes. It'd be really funny if they did it behind the scenes, and if they used CGI to basically previs some of this. That's the funny part, would be if they use CGI to previs it, but they just won't just do CGI for this particular project when it probably should be CGI.
Yeah. Yeah, could very well be. Could very well be. And then, of course, here's another perspective with David Mott saying, I suck at fighting games, so I never tried it. And I feel like there's a lot more people who probably will be interested in this movie who probably didn't have anything to do with the video game. So that's part of it too. So,
well, and I never played Injustice because when Injustice came out, I was too, I've said this before on the show. I reached a point in my career where I had to choose if I was going to keep playing video games or if I was going to work.
Right.
And I chose to work instead of continuing to play video games. So I kind of gave up video games to focus on working because I was at a crossroads, and I I couldn't continue to do both. One of them had to go. So I said goodbye to video games for my career.
So you've never played the game either.
I've never played it, but the funny thing is I'm an avid fighting game guy. I talked before, like I used to do regional tournaments for Street Fighter back when it was Street Fighter 2 and then Street Fighter 2, Super Street Fighter 2. Like I was on the tournament circuit and I used to play regionally kind of in the Mid-South when they would have like money buy-in tournaments and stuff and you pay a fee and you compete against other people. Like I used to do that all the time. And I'm a big fighting game guy. The last game I played pretty religiously actually was the DC versus Mortal Kombat game. And my brother, who's a big avid fighting game guy, he and I used to fight each other basically almost every night. It seemed like after work. He would log in back in, Tennessee where he was, and I would log in here in Arizona, and we'd put our headsets with our things on and we would trash talk each other and we would beat the hell out of each other, playing Mortal Kombat versus DC. And it was so funny because one of my favorite characters to use was actually Deathstroke because he was an interesting mix of martial arts and superpowers. Yeah, and when I get frustrated fighting my brother, I would go to my second choice, which was the character I used to do tournaments with, which was Sub-Zero. Yeah. So because I just knew Sub-Zero's skill set so well. And they change his timing in all the different games, but the timing isn't that off. So if you kind of understand kind of how to get someone locked in a combo loop, you can pretty much keep them in it unless the person's got really good timing or they really understand how to break the combo. And so that's why I'd always fall back on Sub-Zero, because even though his timing was different, his combos, if you could get someone into a combo loop, you could pretty much dominate the fight. And my brother's pretty good at breaking a combo, but that's the last game I played. That was a big fighting game. And my brother kept saying, you have to fight and play Justice. It's so great. And I just was at a point where I was like, I can't. I'm either going to focus on my career or I'm going to play video games, and I have to pick. And so I decided to focus on my career. Jury's still out if that was a good choice, everybody. Jury is still out. I might be sitting on my deathbed going, I should have played more video games. We'll see. Jury's still out.
Well, I did have one more thing that I just wanted to touch on. It is video game related, and I put it in the description, so I'm going to touch on it. And there's not much to say about it. This is from Kodaku.com, and the title of this article reads, "Now it's Wolverine's turn for a big budget video game. Insomniac Games turns its attention to another Marvel superhero." And you can see a little tease of an image here of Wolverine's claw. And it says, after nailing Spider-Man, Insomniac Games' next superhero challenge will be X-Men's Wolverine. Sony revealed this today during its PS5 showcase. The superhero fad might be winding down in Hollywood. I don't know how it's winding down in Hollywood, by the way. Didn't Shang Chi just come out? But anyway, but it's currently in full swing on the gaming side. So there was a sort of reveal trailer that came out. It doesn't look like it really had any game footage or anything like that in it. It was an interesting setup. Did you happen to actually see it, Dave? I wasn't sure if you got to see it before the show.
Yeah, I did. I did see it. I didn't. We hadn't talked about it in advance. So we were going to cover it on the show, but I did see it. I didn't have it with the sound on though. The sound was off, and I just had it playing because I was like, "Oh, Wolverine game." Because I talked before that I liked that Midnight Suns teaser that they released, and Wolverine was in that. And I thought, oh, this looks fun. My only thought with this is, have they done a Wolverine game before?
Just Wolverine? I mean, Wolverine's appeared in a lot of other video games before. I know that. I would think that they've made at least some sort of licensing from the Wolverine movies. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you would think.
But as far as whether they've had an exclusive Wolverine game, I'm not 100% sure. is something I can look up. Like if I just put in Wolverine video game,
Yeah, I was going to do that.
what pops up? This pops up. X-Men Origins Wolverine video game. There you go. So they did have at least one for the Wolverine movies. So
Okay, yeah.
X-Men Origins Wolverine did have its own video game.
Well, that explains why people are having selective memory and they don't remember Wolverine having a video game before then.
Yeah. I'm sure it was very forgettable, as many licensed games are.
Yeah.
That's a pretty.
Well, it's just weird to me because it's just Wolverine is like one of the most iconic, classic Marvel Comics characters right now from one of the most popular franchises, whether you want to talk about just the X-Men comic books,
right,
the X-Men cartoons, or the X-Men movies. Like, I mean, the fact that Wolverine hasn't had more than one possibly standalone game before now really kind of boggles the mind the more you think about it.
Yeah, I guess it does. Well, it does. It does and it doesn't to me because I mean, like, how many Iron Man games are? Again, it's probably based on the movies. You know what I mean? There might be 3 Iron Man games, but that's because there's 3 Iron Man movies. So I mean, I don't like how many Thor games are there, you know? But as in terms of how many games feature Thor, how many games feature Iron Man, how many games feature all these different characters. I mean, some of these games that have been licensed for Marvel, they're pretty elaborate. I mean, they have some mighty obscure characters in them that you might actually be surprised that they even have that character. So there's X2 Wolverine's Revenge. It was on the PlayStation 2. So there you got another one. So at least 2 right there off the top. And that's exclusive. That doesn't count the number of games that Wolverine is in. And I really do think that should be pointed out because there are lots of good games, Marvel games, and again, they have tons and tons of characters in them, and Wolverine happens to be one of them.
Well, one of the best X-Men games still of all time, in my opinion, was actually besides the stand-up arcade game, was actually the X-Men video game that was on the Genesis. So there have been lots of great video games that had Wolverine in them. Right. The only point I'm trying to make is that most of the really great Wolverine stories that people think of, you know, like the Wolverine miniseries where he goes to Japan and fights Shingen and potentially is going to marry Lady Mariko, which was the Wolverine movie. Prior to that, I mean, you know, a lot of the really great Wolverine storylines are standalone, and would have made great material for a video game before now. So I'm just kind of surprised that besides licensing, there's never been like there's been multiple attempts to give Superman like a really great standalone game. There have been multiple attempts to give Batman a really great standalone game. Just to me, you know, Spider-Man, great standalone games. I just feel like Wolverine is that other Marvel character that maybe should have had a great standalone game before now.
Yeah, and we'll see. I mean, this won't be out forever. There's no details on it whatsoever, other than it's going to be on PlayStation 5. So you're going to use PlayStation 5 if you want to play this. Interesting little trivia there that David Motz had, that Mark Hamill actually played the voice of Wolverine in Wolverine's X2 Wolverine's Revenge. Interestingly enough, because I was just looking at that, David Motz, when you said that, I decided to look it up, and it's funny to see that Patrick Stewart actually did reprise his role as Professor X, but for some reason they couldn't get Hugh Jackman. It's kind of
weird.
Interesting. So at least
the
2
wrong
right
house,
there.
Bob.
That's 2 X-Men games right there for you, Dave.
Yeah, there you go. All right, okay. Well, I don't know. I mean, I've been they put a bunch of the X-Men movies on Disney Plus, and I've been working on stuff because I've been doing a lot more design work, you know, here at the house lately. That's just pure design work. Like I built a website and some other stuff for different clients, and I've had those X-Men movies on, and it's interesting the weird circuitous continuity, schmontinuity thing that's been going on with the X-Men movies for quite some time. And I love those movies. And in my mind, they all follow the same through line until you actually watch them. And you're like, because they just recently put X-Men Origins, the Wolverine movie on there, which is easily the worst X-Men movie I think they've ever made. And I had it on.
No. I those are fighting words. Nothing's worse than X-Men 3. There's nothing worse than X-Men.
Last Stand.
There's no film.
Is bad.
There's no film ever made that's worse than X-Men 3. So.
But see, Last Stand at least has some cool things. Like Beast is really cool in Last Stand. Like that, like some really horrible choices in Last Stand. It's not a great film. Like
Kelsey Grammer's Beast. That's the one thing that I like in X-Men 3, but there's nothing else I like in that, including Wolverine, including all the characters that were already established. They're terrible. They're absolutely terrible. Patrick Stewart's terrible. Everybody's terrible in that movie. All the characters are terrible. The actors are terrible. I can't say enough bad things about X-Men 3. I will concede that Kelsey Grammer is good. He's the one bright spot in that movie. His version of Beast is very good, and I would love to see him reprise that role. But other than that, it is garbage. That movie is garbage. Absolute garbage.
Well,
you finally got Colossus, and I'm brain farting on the name. Juggernaut. You finally have Colossus and Juggernaut in a movie together, and they don't fight. If you are not incensed by that, you need your nerd card just revoked right now. If you're not incensed by that, like absolutely incensed, give me your nerd card right now. It needs to be taken away. Because that's inexcusable for Colossus and Juggernaut to be in a movie together and not fight each other. That is just it disgusts me. It disgusts me. I'm sorry. There's just not enough bad things I can say about X-Men 3.
Well,
that movie sucks.
I feel just as bad about X-Men Origins Wolverine. And
the problem with X-Men Origins Wolverine, the problem. There's multiple problems.
I think you mean problems.
Yeah, there's multiple problems. But the thing that I think that's such a betrayal is everybody, was like, hey, this is Wolverine's, big outing by himself. And at that point, Hugh Jackman was a legend as far as his performance of Wolverine. And it just, it couldn't live up to the hype, I think, in a lot of ways. And it just didn't. And they made so many questionable choices, obviously what they did with Deadpool, you know what I mean? But hey, that's something that they've used now, right? That's something that Ryan Reynolds still uses. I mean, he used it in the Deadpool movie. So
yeah, well,
he redeemed it.
Well, the only point I was going to get at is just the fact that I've had these movies on. So I had X-Men Origins Wolverine on just because it'd been so long since I'd seen it, and I knew it was bad, but I was refreshing my memory, like how bad, how many questionable choices, and lowest on the totem pole is the weird inclusion of Diamond shifting Emma Frost and Cyclops both being prisoners of Stryker. Like that's lowest on the totem pole, but still is so weird to me even to this day. And that's one of the lowest things they did that was wrong. But having seen that, and then I turned on Apocalypse, X-Men Apocalypse, and just the complete incongruity between the Weapon X scene in Apocalypse and the X-Men Origins Wolverine Weapon X stuff. I'm like, these things are kind of similar, but totally not. Like, this makes no sense why these moments in time are so disparately disconnected from each other. I mean, I know they messed with time because of Days of Future Past, but that still doesn't explain how just completely out of sync with each other they are.
Yeah, I never saw Apocalypse. I just skipped it. I just by that point I was like, the franchise is over for me. So And I like Days of Future Past. I thought that was just like, hey, this is a good point to get off. You know what I mean? And once I saw that, I was like, this is a good point to get out of here. So I'm out of here. So.
All right. Well, there you go. Okay. Do you have anything else you want to cover for this episode?
That was it.
All right. Okay. All right. Unless anyone in the Rogues Gallery has anything else they want to contribute.
And David Motz, how dare you? Grammar is not too old to play Beast. How dare you?
He could always do the voice.
How dare you, David Motz?
So. All right. Very cool. All right. So let's go ahead and go to the closing. So we want to thank you for all of you watching and listening to this episode of the Retro Rogues Live. I want to thank those of you who joined us for this episode. If you're curious to see what occupies a lot of my time, if you're curious actually about even getting some commission work or something done, definitely go over. You can contact me actually through Kirby Tees, which is my t-shirt company. You can see a lot of the fun things we have over there. It's at kirbytees.com. That's KIRY. There we go. Thank you, Eric. KR. Why can't I spell tonight? KIRBYTS.com. Or even you can check it out over at davebeatty.com. That's DAVEBEATY.com. Definitely go there, check out what we got going on. Possibly even consider purchasing a Retro Rogues Live t-shirt and supporting what we're doing here on the show. We would greatly appreciate your support. And that's over at kirbytees.com, KIRBYTS.com. All right. Enough about that. I want to thank my great co-host, Mr. Eric Alexander, for being on here as always, providing his unique perspective and point of view to all these different topics we talked about, whether they be pop culture or collectibles. Eric, please tell the folks, hopefully watching or listening at home, where they can learn more about you on the interwebs.
Well, I am most active on Twitter. You can reach me there at BassGod14. That's at BASSGOD14. That's also the official YouTube. That's also the official Twitch. So if you comment on any of those platforms, more likely than not, I will be the one responding to you on those platforms. Again, Twitch, YouTube, and Twitter. And then also my DMs are open on Twitter. So if you have any suggestions, anything that you'd like us to cover on the show, obviously we have an emphasis on pop culture. So that's trading cards, that's toys, that's comics. We do some video game stuff, as we've been talking about some video game news today. But we also do cover pop culture news and streaming wars from time to time. So if you have any leads, rumors, or anything that you want us to cover regarding that, you can always send that our way as well. And of course, we do have an independent focus on this show. So if you have some independent projects that you're interested in us covering, or maybe you have an independent project that you would like to promote on the show, let us know, because we're always looking for independent products and independent projects here on this show. We want to support them. So we did have a few little comments here. Jane said that she enjoyed the show. And Dave said, you took the blue pill. So with that, we'll go ahead and leave the two of them with the last word.